Well, joining us now in the studio is our security analyst, Jonathan Regev, and our international affairs analyst, Dan Perry. 600 days later, Dan, I want to start with you. Where do things stand now? How close are we to the end of this war?
The shocking thing is that we stand strangely close to where we stood days and weeks into it, which is that Hamas is demanding the end of the war and the withdrawal of Israel in exchange for the return of all the hostages. And I mean, I'm tired of that phrase because I've said it about 100 times. It's incredible that despite the devastation wrought upon Gaza, despite the killing of almost the entire Hamas leadership, this is still where we are. So look, the war has had successes, especially from Israel's perspective, especially in Lebanon, obviously, where a really grand new positive horizon beckons because of the thrashing of Hezbollah. And a weakening of Iran, that's also been a success, I suppose. But good Lord, I mean, few people in Israel, including people who are now apologists for it and say, well, it had to take this long and it's going to take, years still. Few would have thought that 600 days later, Israel would have failed to pacify Hamas, basically. And I think partly it comes from the fact that the war has been conducted without a strategy. Consider the fact that Israel says it wants Hamas gone, but despite 600 days to think about this, Israel's yet to say what it wants the day after, and is conflicted.
Right.
And this attaches to another one of the reasons why possibly it's gone on this long, the politics. Israel can't say the obvious words that some version of the Palestinian Authority needs to replace Hamas with reforms and with assistance of the Arabs and with massive hand-holding from all corners of the earth, because the far right in the government won't allow them to do this. Right. And similarly, Netanyahu can end the war on Hamas's terms for the same reason. And cynics in Israel will say, and I honestly don't know if this is true, but half the public or more believes this, that Netanyahu is artificially prolonging the war without an actual goal, because that's what keeps his coalition together. Weirdly, therein lies some hope, because right now this is causing him tremendous political damage. He has to face elections within a year, or maybe slightly more. And if he was smart, he would at this point turn on a dime and change his policy entirely, because there is a grand regional realignment that Israel can benefit from if only Israel took several basic steps, ended the war, and created global pressure and Arab pressure and Palestinian pressure on what's left of Hamas to stand aside.
I'm interested to hear your take on this, Jonathan. Obviously, your focus is more on security. There are many questions as to what role politics and diplomacy are playing in this, and also what role Trump is ultimately going to have in the end to this war, whether or not pressure from the United States is going to ultimately lead to the end of the war, or if this is ultimately going to be a situation and a decision that is made by Netanyahu and his government.
Eventually, it will be, I think, that the decisions. It's not very nice for us to say it, but I think, yes, the decisions in Washington eventually make up the reality of what is happening here in Israel. I don't think the Trump administration is at a point yet where they've said, we've had enough, this war stops now. They have said, we've heard it, they have said this war has to end, we want to bring it to an end. First, I do believe that Trump wants the war to end and to bring all the hostages back, but Trump also wants the regional alignment, which were mentioned here. We saw that in his visit to the Gulf countries just 2 weeks ago, and this is something that he wants to see, and the war is preventing from that to happen. If it drags too long, too much, then at a certain point, President Trump, I think, will say, enough, you stop, you Israel, stop now.
Mm-hmm. You think that Netanyahu is happier with the Trump administration than the Biden administration, or is perhaps the feeling that tables are now turning and this may not be in his best interest?
A sophisticated Netanyahu would maybe rethink the idea that Trump is better, because Trump is no one's actual ally and no one's actual friend, whereas Biden was a committed Zionist who's emotionally attached to Israel. Now, it's true that they're aligned politically, or have been, but that can change depending on American interests. American interests are not a forever war in the Middle East, whereas Netanyahu's coalition definitely survives better with a forever war. I don't think Trump wants this to go on much longer, and it is really, really bizarre how it essentially is a decision of one man, and one man who is not particularly knowledgeable about the Middle East and has no real sentimental attachment to Israel. So that is a danger for Israel, for Netanyahu. and really for anyone that comes into contact with the U.S. administration, which has upended the entirety of American foreign policy.
It's interesting because it almost feels like in this conversation, Israel's agency is non-existent.
No, it's not existent. Israel can't continue the war without American assistance. It cannot be done.
Jordan has taken a series of public steps over the last year, as many have seen, to distance itself from Israel amid growing anger over the war in Gaza. But beneath the surface, military and intelligence ties still remain intact. Well, now Jordan's UN ambassador Mahmoud Daifallah Hamoud has just been elected unanimously to serve as a judge on the International Court of Justice, and questions are swirling. I'd like to kind of hear your take on this. I mean, should we be watching for a sign that Jordan-Israel relations are at a breaking point, especially with this ICJ appointment? What do you think this ultimately means?
It's always very delicate with Jordan, but honestly, we should be watching, yes. But you know, the list of worries for Israel is so long that whereas if Jordan blows up, of course, it shoots to number one. I think the likelihood of that is very, very low. The country is at the state level. I can't say government because they dislike the current government, but at the state level, are good friends, and they have to be. They have to collaborate because Israel's longest border, by far, is with Jordan, and it can't be porous and it must be policed. But on the other hand, the government of Jordan has a legitimacy problem.
Right.
I mean, it's not democratic, it's a monarchy. The Hashemites that run the monarchy are a minority in Jordan. A majority of Jordan identifies somehow as Palestinians. Many of them don't want to be friends with Israel, so occasionally that gap is bridged by statements. And it's not false statements. I mean, very few people in Israel are happy with what's happening in the war. So of course they're angry in Jordan. I suspect that the war will end actually fairly soon for a variety of reasons, and this issue will be done. As for the long-term fallout, Israel's at loggerheads with the ICJ and the ICC, of course. The ICJ last year declared Israel's actions in West Bank illegal. You now have an unfriendly judge at the ICJ. It's not great for Israel. But again, Israel has so many problems. I think a bigger problem is that the Europeans are threatening to cancel Israel's association agreement with the EU. That would be devastating. As for the ICJ, it has no enforcement powers and is a bit of a joke.
I'm interested to hear your take on, how Trump's leadership is ultimately going to impact Israel's decision-making when it comes to whether or not to strike Iran at this point.
I don't think Israel can go against the U.S. on an issue this huge. It's not just risky. It risks something cataclysmic. Iran could attack U.S. interests in the Gulf. U.S. has a massive military presence very close to Iran, and it will almost surely be dragged in. I tend to discount anything said, any saber-rattling that happens in public or that's hinted to the New York Times. Under the fog of war and in the middle of delicate and secretive negotiations, I wouldn't take the headlines too seriously.
Right.
Israel really can't afford to do something this dramatic and upset the U.S. this badly. I am a hawk on Iran. I want to see their government overthrown. I think the people of Iran would love to see that as well. And the military strike would stand a pretty good chance, if it's done cleverly, to do more than paralyze Iran's nuclear program, but to compel the people to bring down the regime that has oppressed them for 45 years. I'm disappointed in Trump for not using this moment of Iranian weakness to demand more. It seems, now again, got to be careful because I'm not in the room during the talks, but it seems like, Witkoff and the other negotiation and Middle East neophytes facing off against the Iranians are essentially going to reprise the JCPOA, the Barack Obama deal from the 2015 that Trump walked away from. And they'll claim it's different, and they'll claim the verification is better, but they'll largely be nonsense probably, because Iran wasn't, Mossad and CIA agree, actually violating the terms of its agreement. What Iran was doing is continuing its skullduggeries that were not part of the agreement, with the proxy militias raining chaos upon the region, and with its missile program, and with its interference in Iraq, and so on, and the oppression of its own people. So U.S. has so much leverage right now that I think Trump could have gotten much more than just the reprisal of the JCPOA.
Right. The question is, who's sitting in Trump's ear right now and advising him on this specific issue? Obviously, there are domestic politics that are impacting everything.
He's desperate for a win somewhere, something he can present as a win. He didn't stop the Ukraine war on day one as promised. He hasn't stopped the Gaza war. There's no beautiful resorts owned and built by the U.S. in Gaza. All of that has gone up in smoke so far. A deal with Iran he'll present as something that only he could have fixed.
Right. Well, I'd like to talk about domestic politics within Israel and Iran more specifically, and how those politics could influence their respective stances on this issue. Obviously, when it comes to the idea of Israel potentially striking Iran, that would be a move that could potentially strengthen Netanyahu in this current moment in time when he's facing a lot of backlash from the public about the ongoing war in Gaza. But do you think that that is enough for Israel to push forward with making a move like that?
I mean, am I sufficiently cynical about Netanyahu to think he might do it for political reasons despite the risks? I actually think not. I don't think he's quite there yet in terms of his utilitarian immorality. I don't think he would. Look, a strike on Iran risks a massive war. We know their air defenses have been weakened, but their missile capacity is still there. Now, I realize that the missile launchers are in fixed locations, and there's a chance maybe Israel can paralyze that as well. But remember, Iran has already staged 2 of the largest ballistic missile attacks in history on Israel in the past year and a half. I'm not sure Israel got away with that because of American collaboration and European collaboration on bringing down the projectiles, drones and missiles. I don't think Israel wants to risk that level of war. On the other hand, yes, it's tempting because of what I said before. The Iranian regime could collapse as a consequence of a strategically clever attack.
That's where the domestic
and that would be
politics come in
such
here.
a victory for the planet that, Netanyahu may get the Nobel Peace Prize despite Gaza. If he actually manages that, it will be Iranians who are nominating him. So, bottom line, I suspect this will go to diplomatic route and the U.S. will be waving a piece of paper.
All right, Dan, thank you so much for that insight.